Hey everyone, tonight we're not diving into dynasties or conquering emperors, but into something far more intimate and surprisingly sophisticated. The ancient Chinese approach to cleanliness, personal care, and what they considered proper hygiene. We're travelling to a civilization that was already perfecting toothbrushes, while the rest of the world was still chewing on twigs, where bathhouses were social centres and medicinal soaks were prescribed like modern vitamins, and where the wealthy had beauty routines that would make today's skincare enthusiasts take notes. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. In ancient China, hygiene wasn't just about not offending your neighbours with your personal aroma, though that was certainly a consideration. It was deeply intertwined with philosophy, medicine, and the cosmic order itself. The Chinese approach to cleanliness was part of a larger worldview that saw the human body as a microcosm of the universe, where balance and harmony were essential not just for health, but for spiritual well-being. The concept of qi, the vital energy that flows through all living things, played a central role in Chinese hygiene practices. Blocked or stagnant qi was believed to cause illness, bad luck, and presumably really terrible breath. So maintaining cleanliness wasn't just about appearances, it was about keeping your cosmic energy flowing properly. Which, when you think about it, is a much more compelling reason to bathe than simply not wanting to smell like a fermented fish market. Traditional Chinese medicine divided the body into systems of hot and cold, wet and dry, and various other balancing acts that would make a circus performer dizzy. Personal hygiene practices were designed to maintain these delicate equilibria. Too much bathing could weaken your yang energy, while too little could allow yin to stagnate. It was like trying to tune a cosmic piano while blindfolded and slightly drunk. The ancient Chinese also believed that different parts of the body required different types of care at different times of the year. Spring cleaning wasn't just for houses, it was for humans too. They had seasonal hygiene rituals that aligned with the agricultural calendar because apparently even your armpits needed to be in harmony with the cosmos. Confucian ideals also shaped hygiene practices, emphasizing moderation, propriety, and social harmony. A truly virtuous person maintained their body as carefully as they maintained their moral character. This meant that personal cleanliness became a reflection of one's inner state and social standing. If you showed up to court looking like you'd been wrestling with a particularly aggressive goat, people didn't just think you were dirty, they questioned your entire moral framework. The Taoist approach was somewhat different, focusing on living in harmony with nature and not forcing artificial cleanliness upon the body. Some Taoist practitioners believed that excessive washing could strip away natural protective energies. This led to some interesting philosophical debates about whether soap was a tool of enlightenment or a weapon against the natural order. Imagine having that argument at a dinner party. Water itself held special significance in Chinese culture. It was one of the 5 elements associated with wisdom, flexibility, and the kidney system. The quality, temperature, and source of water used for bathing were all considered important factors in maintaining health. Using the wrong kind of water was like trying to meditate it in a thunderstorm. Technically possible, but probably counterproductive. The ancient Chinese developed elaborate systems for categorizing different types of dirt, sweat, and bodily emanations. They had specific terms for summer sweat versus winter sweat, honest dirt from labor versus shameful dirt from laziness, and even different categories for the odors produced by different emotional states. Fierce sweat, apparently, had its own distinct classification, because nothing says advanced civilization like having 37 different words for the smell of anxiety. When you're the son of heaven, your bathing routine can't just be a quick splash in the local river. Chinese emperors elevated personal hygiene to an art form that would make modern spa enthusiasts weep with envy, or possibly terror, depending on how you felt about being bathed by a team of specially trained eunuchs. The imperial bathing chambers were architectural marvels that combined luxury with spiritual significance. The Forbidden City contained multiple bathing halls, each designed for different seasons, moods, and presumably different levels of cosmic alignment. The water was heated using complex systems of bronze pipes and furnaces, maintained at precise temperatures by servants whose entire career depended on never making the emperor feel slightly chilly or uncomfortably warm. Imperial baths weren't just filled with water, they were complex cocktails of herbs, minerals, and occasionally things that modern people would consider either medicinal or mildly terrifying. Popular additives included chrysanthemum petals for clarity of mind, ginseng for vitality, and various aromatic woods that were supposed to enhance the emperor's natural charisma. Some baths contained milk, wine, or even ground pearls, because apparently regular water wasn't luxurious enough for someone who owned most of China. The ritual surrounding imperial bathing was as elaborate as the bath itself. Specific eunuchs were assigned to test water temperature, others to arrange the herbal ingredients, and still others whose sole job was to ensure that the emperor's back was scrubbed with exactly the right pressure and technique. There were probably meetings about the optimal angle for soap application. Different dynasties had different bathing traditions. The Tang dynasty emperors were known for their elaborate hot spring retreats, where the royal court would relocate for weeks at a time to soak in naturally heated mineral waters. The Song dynasty developed more refined indoor bathing systems, while the Ming dynasty became obsessed with the spiritual purity of their bathing water, sometimes requiring it to be collected from specific mountain springs during particular phases of the moon. The emperor's bathing schedule was often tied to the lunar calendar, state ceremonies, and astrological considerations. Certain days were considered more auspicious for bathing than others, and the imperial astronomers would sometimes advise against bathing during unfavourable celestial alignments. Imagine having to consult the stars before deciding whether to take a shower. Women in the imperial household had their own elaborate bathing traditions. Empress dowagers and favoured concubines might bathe in chambers decorated with jade, ivory, and precious metals. Their baths often included exotic ingredients imported from across the empire, Tibetan snow, South China sea salt, or flowers that bloomed only once a year. The competition among concubines to develop the most alluring bath recipes was apparently intense enough to influence international trade routes. The emperor's bathwater was considered so potent with imperial essence that it couldn't just be discarded casually. Used bathwater was sometimes distributed to favoured courtiers as a mark of special honour, or used to water imperial gardens in the belief that plants would absorb some of the emperor's virtue. Because nothing says divine mandate like recycled bathwater. Imperial bathing servants underwent years of training in temperature regulation, herbal preparation, and the subtle art of scrubbing royalty without accidentally committing treason. They learned to read the emperor's mood by the way he entered the water, adjust their techniques based on the season and the emperor's health, and most importantly, to never, under any circumstances, splash. While emperors soaked in pearl-infused luxury, ordinary Chinese citizens developed their own hygiene practices that were equal parts practical, ingenious, and occasionally desperate. The average person's relationship with cleanliness was less about cosmic harmony and more about not dying from preventable diseases, while still being able to afford food. Most common people bathed in rivers, lakes, or communal bathhouses when available. Public bathing facilities were surprisingly sophisticated in many Chinese cities, with separate areas for men and women, different pools for different social classes, and attendants who helped maintain basic hygiene standards. These weren't always the most pleasant experiences. Imagine a public pool, but everyone's sharing the same water. There's no chlorine, and half the patrons haven't bathed since the last lunar eclipse. The frequency of bathing varied dramatically based on season, social status, and local customs. In northern China, where winters could be brutally cold, full-body bathing might only happen a few times per year. People compensated with frequent washing of hands, face and feet, and by changing their undergarments more regularly. In southern China, with its warmer climate and abundant water sources, bathing was more frequent, though still far from daily for most people. Soap was a luxury item for most of the population, so common folk developed creative alternatives. Saponin-rich plants like soapberries were crushed and used as natural cleansers. Rice water, left over from cooking, was saved and used for washing hair and skin. Clay and sand served as abrasives for scrubbing away stubborn dirt. Some regions used fermented plant juices that produced a mild foaming action. It was like ancient chemistry class, except your lab partner was your grandmother, and your homework was not smelling terrible. Winter bathing for common people required serious logistics and courage. Water had to be heated over fires, usually in small quantities, leading to the development of efficient sponge bath techniques using cloths and small bowls. Families would often share bath water, with the cleanest person going first and the dirtiest going last. This created complex social hierarchies based on who got the fresh water and who got the less fresh water. Rural communities developed communal bathing schedules, often timed around market days or religious festivals. Entire villages would coordinate their bathing activities, with families taking turns using shared facilities or collectively heating large quantities of water. These communal bathing events became social occasions, complete with gossip, matchmaking, and presumably a lot of discussions about whose turn it was to clean the tub. The Chinese invented various ingenious tools for personal hygiene that common people could afford. Bamboo combs, wooden scrapers for removing dead skin, and cloth brushes made from rough plant fibres were all standard equipment. Some regions developed portable washing kits that could be easily carried by travellers or workers, essentially the ancient equivalent of travel-sized toiletries, except everything was made of plant matter and good intentions. Seasonal hygiene practices among commoners were highly developed. Spring meant thorough cleaning after months of winter accumulation. Summer required frequent cooling baths and sweat management. Autumn was for preparing the body for winter's challenges, and winter focused on maintenance cleaning that conserved heat and resources. It was like having 4 different hygiene strategies per year, each adapted to specific weather conditions and agricultural demands. Common people also developed sophisticated systems for managing body odour and maintaining social acceptability without frequent bathing. This included strategic use of aromatic herbs, regular changing of inner garments, and specific dietary practices believed to influence body scent. Tea consumption, for instance, was thought to improve one's natural aroma, which gave people yet another reason to drink more tea. Ancient Chinese toilets were marvels of practical engineering that ranged from surprisingly sophisticated to absolutely terrifying, depending on your social status and geographic location. The development of sanitation systems in China was driven by a combination of public health concerns, philosophical principles about cleanliness, and the very practical reality that human waste had to go somewhere, and preferably not in the drinking water. In urban areas, particularly during the Han and Tang dynasties, public latrines were communal affairs that served entire neighbourhoods. These weren't the private, contemplative experiences we're accustomed to today. They were social hubs, where people caught up on neighbourhood gossip while attending to their bodily functions. Imagine trying to concentrate on important business while your neighbour discusses the price of rice and their daughter's marriage prospects. The design of these public facilities varied by region and period, but most featured long benches with multiple holes positioned over flowing water channels or deep pits. The flowing water system was particularly ingenious. Waste was carried away by carefully engineered watercourses that transported it outside the city, where it was often collected for use as fertilizer. It was an early form of recycling that modern environmentalists would probably applaud once they got over the initial shock. Private latrines for wealthy households were more elaborate affairs, often featuring decorative elements and better ventilation systems. Some wealthy homes had multi-story latrine towers with different levels for family members of different ranks. The ground level might be for servants, the second story for regular family members, and the top level reserved for the head of household, because apparently even bathroom access was subject to social hierarchy. The Chinese developed various materials for personal cleaning that were both practical and culturally specific. Wealthy people used soft cloths, usually silk or fine cotton, which were washed and reused. Common people relied on smooth sticks, bamboo strips, or specially prepared plant materials. Some regions used corn cobs, leaves, or even seashells, depending on local availability. The key was finding something that was effective, comfortable, and unlikely to cause injury, criteria that led to some very creative solutions. Toilet paper, interestingly, was actually invented in China during the Yuan dynasty, making the Chinese pioneers in what would become one of civilization's most essential inventions. However, this early paper was expensive and primarily used by the wealthy. Most people continued using traditional methods for centuries after paper became available, because old habits die hard and toilet paper was a luxury item. Rural latrines were typically simpler affairs, basic pit toilets that were moved periodically when filled. However, these weren't just holes in the ground. They were carefully engineered to maximize fertilizer value while minimizing health risks. The positioning, depth, and covering systems were all designed to balance sanitation needs with agricultural benefits. It was waste management that served multiple purposes. The Chinese developed elaborate systems for collecting and processing human waste for agricultural use. Night soil collectors made regular rounds through cities, gathering waste from private and public latrines. This material was then composted using specific techniques that reduced disease risk while maximizing fertilizer value. The entire process was regulated by law and managed by specialized guilds. Imagine having a career in medieval waste management that was actually essential to the food supply. Bathroom etiquette in ancient China was highly developed and varied by social context. Public latrines had unwritten rules about conversation topics, seating arrangements, and proper behaviour. Private facilities required different protocols depending on the household status and the user's rank within the family hierarchy. There were even specific protocols for emergency situations, guest usage, and seasonal variations in latrine access. The integration of bathroom facilities with overall household design reflected Chinese architectural principles about energy flow and spiritual harmony. Latrines were positioned to minimize negative impacts on the home's feng shui while maximizing practical convenience. This often meant complex layouts that balanced hygiene needs with cosmic concerns, because even your toilet had to be in harmony with the universe. In ancient China, hair was never just hair. It was a statement of social status, moral character, spiritual health, and cosmic alignment, all wrapped up in whatever style happened to be fashionable during your particular dynasty. The relationship between Chinese people and their hair was so complex that entire philosophical treatises were written about proper hair care, and wars were possibly fought over the right to wear certain hairstyles. The foundation of Chinese hair care was the belief that hair reflected the health of one's qi and blood. Strong, lustrous hair indicated good internal health and proper spiritual balance, while thin, dull, or prematurely grey hair suggested internal problems that needed attention. This meant that hair care wasn't vanity, it was preventive medicine with aesthetic benefits. Chinese hair washing practices were elaborate rituals that varied by season, social status, and individual constitution. Hair wasn't washed daily. In fact, daily washing was considered potentially harmful to the hair's natural protective oils and the scalp's core balance. Instead, most people wash their hair weekly or bi-weekly using specific preparations designed to cleanse without stripping away essential moisture. The Chinese developed an impressive array of natural hair cleansers that would make modern organic shampoo enthusiasts jealous. Rice water was a popular choice. The starchy liquid left over from cooking rice was believed to strengthen hair and add shine. Soap beans crushed and mixed with water provided a mild cleansing foam. Various herbs like polygonum, ginseng, and chrysanthemum were brewed into hair tonics that cleaned while supposedly promoting growth and preventing grey hair. For the wealthy, hair washing became an elaborate ceremony involving multiple servants, specially prepared herbal mixtures, and complex rinsing procedures. The water temperature had to be precisely controlled. Too hot would damage the hair's qi, too cold would prevent proper cleansing. The process could take hours with multiple rounds of washing, conditioning with herbal treatments, and careful drying techniques. Hair conditioning in ancient China relied heavily on natural oils and plant-based treatments. Camellia oil was particularly prized for its ability to add shine without weighing hair down. Walnut oil, sesame oil, and various animal fats were used for deep conditioning treatments. Some wealthy women applied these oils overnight, sleeping with their hair wrapped in silk to prevent staining their pillows and maximize the treatment's effectiveness. The Chinese developed sophisticated hairstyling tools that reflected both practical needs and aesthetic preferences. Combs were made from various materials: bone, wood, jade, ivory, and even gold for the extremely wealthy. Different combs served different purposes: wide-toothed combs for detangling wet hair, fine-toothed combs for daily grooming, and specialized combs for applying oils and treatments. Some combs were carved with intricate designs that were believed to channel positive energy into the hair. Hair ornaments in ancient China were more than decorative. They were complex signaling systems that communicated age, marital status, social rank, and regional identity. Unmarried women wore their hair in specific styles that differed from married women's styles. Widows, concubines, and women of different social classes all had distinct hair requirements. Getting your hair ornaments wrong wasn't just a fashion faux pas, it was a social violation that could have serious consequences. The maintenance of long hair, which was the ideal for both men and women through most of Chinese history, required daily attention and specialized techniques. Hair was typically brushed with natural bristle brushes using specific stroke patterns believed to stimulate blood flow and distribute natural oils. The brushing ritual often included meditation or recitation of poetry, turning hair care into a mindfulness practice. Seasonal hair care followed traditional Chinese medicine principles about adapting to environmental changes. Spring hair care focused on stimulating growth after winter dormancy. Summer care emphasized protection from heat and sun. Autumn preparations strengthened hair for winter challenges, and winter care conserved moisture and prevented brittleness. Each season had specific herbs, oils, and techniques associated with optimal hair health. The Chinese also developed various treatments for common hair problems that combined practical solutions with traditional medicine principles. Hair loss was treated with scalp massages using specific herb-infused oils, dietary changes to address underlying qi imbalances, and topical treatments made from ingredients like fresh ginger, black sesame seeds, and various medicinal plants. Some treatments were surprisingly effective, while others were probably more ceremonial than therapeutic. Ancient Chinese dental care was a fascinating combination of practical oral hygiene, traditional medicine, and social etiquette that would make modern dentists both impressed and slightly horrified. The Chinese understood the connection between oral health and overall well-being long before anyone had heard of bacteria, and they developed sophisticated systems for maintaining dental hygiene that were both effective and deeply embedded in cultural practices. The concept of dental hygiene in ancient China was inseparable from broader ideas about health and social propriety. Bad breath wasn't just unpleasant, it was considered a sign of internal imbalance, poor moral character, and potential illness. Keeping one's mouth clean was therefore both a health necessity and a social obligation, particularly for anyone who had to interact with people of higher social status. Chinese tooth cleaning practices evolved over centuries, with different dynasties contributing various innovations and refinements. The basic approach involved mechanical cleaning using various tools, chemical cleaning with herbal preparations, and dietary practices designed to promote oral health. It was a holistic system that addressed not just the symptoms of dental problems, but their underlying causes. The Chinese developed an impressive array of tools for cleaning teeth that were both practical and often beautiful. Toothpicks made from precious woods, bone, or metal were common among the wealthy. These weren't just functional items, they were often carved with decorative patterns and carried in special cases as personal accessories. Some toothpicks were made from aromatic woods that freshened breath while cleaning teeth. Toothbrushing in ancient China used a variety of implements that served as predecessors to modern toothbrushes. Chewing sticks made from willow, poplar, or other trees with naturally antibacterial properties were frayed at one end to create bristles. These sticks often contained natural compounds that helped clean teeth and freshen breath. Some regions used bundles of pig bristles attached to bamboo or bone handles, essentially primitive toothbrushes that were surprisingly effective. Chinese tooth powder was a sophisticated mixture of various ingredients designed to clean, whiten, and strengthen teeth. Common ingredients included salt, crushed shells, powdered herbs, and various minerals. Some formulations included ingredients like crushed pearls for whitening, ginseng for strengthening gums, and aromatic herbs for breath freshening. The wealthy could afford exotic ingredients imported from distant regions, while common people used locally available materials. The Chinese understanding of the relationship between diet and dental health was remarkably advanced. They recognized that certain foods promoted dental health while others caused problems. Tea consumption was encouraged not just for its general health benefits, but for its ability to reduce oral bacteria and freshen breath. Sweet foods were understood to be harmful to teeth, though the mechanisms weren't fully understood until much later. Herbal mouth rinses were common in ancient China, with different formulations for different oral health issues. These rinses served multiple purposes: cleaning teeth and gums, freshening breath, treating oral infections, and maintaining overall oral health. Popular ingredients included mint, chrysanthemum, green tea, and various medicinal herbs that were believed to strengthen teeth and prevent decay. The Chinese developed specific techniques for dealing with dental problems that combined practical solutions with traditional medicine approaches. Toothaches were treated with herbal poultices, acupuncture, and specific dietary modifications. Loose teeth were treated with herbal strengthening preparations and gum massage techniques. While these treatments weren't always successful, they represented sophisticated attempts to address dental problems without modern technology. Breath freshening in ancient China was both an art and a science, involving various natural preparations and techniques. Popular breath fresheners included cloves, cardamom, fresh herbs, and specially prepared herbal lozenges. Some people carried small containers of aromatic seeds or herbs that they could chew discreetly when needed. The wealthy might use imported spices or exotic herbal preparations for breath freshening. Social etiquette around oral hygiene was highly developed in ancient China. There were specific protocols for dental care in public, proper techniques for using toothpicks without offending others, and social expectations about oral cleanliness in different contexts. Court officials, for instance, had stricter oral hygiene requirements than common people, reflecting the belief that social status came with increased hygiene obligations. The integration of dental care with traditional Chinese medicine meant that oral hygiene was often connected to broader health practices. Tongue cleaning was practiced not just for cleanliness, but as a diagnostic tool. The appearance and coating of the tongue were believed to reflect internal health conditions. Gum massage was performed using specific techniques that were thought to improve circulation and strengthen the connection between teeth and overall health. The history of soap and cleansing agents in ancient China is a testament to human ingenuity, cultural adaptation, and the eternal quest to smell better than your neighbours without bankrupting yourself in the process. Long before commercial soap production, the Chinese developed an impressive array of cleansing methods that ranged from remarkably effective to desperately creative. Traditional Chinese soap making was a sophisticated craft that combined chemistry, agriculture, and a deep understanding of different skin and hair types. The basic principles were similar to soap making elsewhere, combining fats with alkaline substances to create a cleansing agent, but the Chinese added their own cultural twists, including specific ingredients for different seasons, skin conditions, and social statuses. The primary source of alkaline material for Chinese soap was plant ash, particularly from certain trees and herbs that were known to produce especially potent lye. Different regions developed preferences for different plants based on local availability and the particular qualities of the resulting soap. Some areas favoured ash from mulberry trees, others preferred specific herbs, and coastal regions sometimes used seaweed ash for its unique properties. Animal fats for soap making came from various sources, with pig fat being most common for everyday soap and more exotic fats reserved for luxury varieties. Beef tallow was used in some regions, while sheep fat was preferred in areas with large pastoral populations. The wealthy could afford soap made with more exotic fats, and some specialised soaps were made with unusual ingredients like bear fat or deer tallow, each believed to have specific beneficial properties. The Chinese developed numerous plant-based cleansing agents that served as alternatives to animal fat soap. Soapberries, Sapinda species, were widely used. These fruits contained natural saponins that produced a mild lather when crushed and mixed with water. The resulting cleansing agent was gentle enough for regular use, but effective enough to remove dirt and oil. Soapberry preparation became a specialised skill, with different techniques for maximising the cleansing power while minimising skin irritation. Rice-based cleansing preparations were another Chinese innovation that reflected the central role of rice in the culture. Rice bran was mixed with various herbs and oils to create gentle cleansing pastes suitable for sensitive skin. Rice water, the starchy liquid left over from cooking rice, was used as a mild cleanser and was believed to brighten skin and add softness. Some preparations combined rice elements with other ingredients to create specialised cleansers for different purposes. Clay and mineral-based cleansers were common in regions with suitable deposits. Different types of clay were recognised for their specific properties. Some were better for oily skin, others for dry skin, and still others for specific skin conditions. The preparation and application of clay cleansers became a specialized knowledge, with practitioners understanding which clays worked best for different people and situations. Herbal cleansing preparations reflected the Chinese approach to medicine and health, with different herbs chosen for their specific beneficial properties. Chrysanthemum was used for its cooling and anti-inflammatory properties, ginseng for its strengthening effects, and various other herbs for specific skin conditions or general health benefits. These herbal cleansers were often prepared fresh and used immediately, requiring considerable knowledge about herb preparation and combination. The wealthy had access to luxury cleansing preparations that included exotic ingredients imported from across Asia, perfumed soaps made with rare oils, cleansers containing ground pearls or precious stones, and preparations made with expensive herbs were all available to those who could afford them. Some of these luxury items were as much about displaying wealth as they were about cleanliness. Seasonal variations in cleansing preparations reflected the Chinese understanding of how environmental changes affected skin and hair needs. Summer cleansers were designed to address increased sweating and heat, often containing cooling herbs and lighter formulations. Winter preparations were richer and more moisturizing, designed to protect skin from cold and dry conditions. Spring and autumn had their own specific preparations designed to help the body adjust to changing conditions. Regional variations in cleansing agents reflected local resources, climate conditions, and cultural preferences. Northern China, with its colder climate and different agricultural base, developed different cleansing traditions than southern China. Coastal regions incorporated marine elements into their preparations, while mountainous areas relied more heavily on forest-derived ingredients. These regional differences created a rich diversity of cleansing traditions across the Chinese Empire. The social aspects of cleansing agent use were complex and reflected broader social hierarchies and cultural values. The type of soap or cleanser a person used communicated information about their social status, regional identity, and personal preferences. Using inappropriate cleansing agents for one's social position could be seen as either pretentious or slovenly, depending on whether one was using materials above or below one's station. In a world without antiperspirants, air conditioning, or synthetic fragrances, the art of smelling pleasant, or at least not actively offensive, required considerable creativity, cultural knowledge, and sometimes significant financial investment. Ancient Chinese approaches to body odor management were sophisticated systems that combined practical odor control with aesthetic enhancement and social signaling. The Chinese understanding of body odor was deeply connected to traditional medicine and concepts of internal balance. Different types of body odors were believed to reflect different internal conditions, some indicating health problems, others suggesting dietary issues, and still others reflecting emotional or spiritual states. This meant that odor management wasn't just about social acceptability. It was about demonstrating internal harmony and good health. Natural deodorizing practices in ancient China relied heavily on dietary modifications and internal treatments. Certain foods were believed to improve one's natural body scent, while others were thought to create unpleasant odors. Tea consumption was particularly valued for its supposed ability to improve body odor from the inside out. Fresh herbs, certain spices, and specific combinations of foods were all part of traditional odor management strategies. Topical deodorizing agents were made from various natural materials that were both effective and culturally appropriate. Powdered herbs, mineral preparations, and plant-based compounds were applied to areas prone to sweating and odor production. Some of these preparations worked by absorbing moisture, others by introducing pleasant scents, and still others by creating conditions that discouraged bacterial growth. the Chinese developed sophisticated perfuming traditions that served multiple purposes beyond simple fragrance. Perfumes were used to enhance personal attractiveness, demonstrate social status, ward off evil spirits, and even provide medicinal benefits. Different perfumes were appropriate for different occasions, seasons, and social contexts, creating a complex system of scent-based communication. Incense played a major role in Chinese perfuming practices, with personal incense burners used to scent clothing, hair, and living spaces. Portable incense burners allowed people to maintain a pleasant, aromatic environment wherever they went. The types of incense used varied based on personal preference, social status, and the specific effects desired. Some incenses were calming, others energizing, and still others believed to enhance mental clarity. Scented oils and aromatic preparations were applied to clothing, hair, and skin to provide long-lasting fragrance. These preparations were often complex mixtures that changed scent over time, providing different aromatic experiences throughout the day. The wealthy could afford oils made from rare flowers, exotic woods, and expensive imported ingredients, while common people used locally available aromatic plants. Clothing perfuming was a sophisticated art that involved treating fabrics with various aromatic substances to provide lasting fragrance. Clothes were stored with sachets of aromatic herbs, fumigated with pleasant-smelling smoke, or treated with scented oils that would release fragrance when warmed by body heat. This approach allowed people to maintain pleasant scents without applying perfumes directly to their skin. The Chinese developed various aromatic accessories that provided portable fragrance while serving other functions. Scented fans, aromatic jewellery, and perfumed handkerchiefs were all common items that combined practical utility with pleasant fragrance. Some of these accessories were designed to release stronger scents when handled or moved, providing on-demand fragrance enhancement. Seasonal fragrance preferences reflected both practical considerations and cultural aesthetics. Spring scents were often floral and light, reflecting the season's renewal and growth. Summer fragrances were chosen for their cooling properties and ability to mask increased perspiration. Autumn scents were often richer and more complex, while winter fragrances were warming and comforting. These seasonal variations created a yearly cycle of aromatic experiences. Social protocols around fragrance use were complex and highly developed. Different social situations required different approaches to personal scent. What was appropriate for casual social interaction might be completely wrong for formal court ceremonies. The intensity, type, and application method of fragrances all had to be carefully considered based on the social context and the people who would be present. The integration of fragrance with traditional Chinese medicine meant that aromatic choices were often made based on their supposed health benefits as well as their pleasant scents. Certain fragrances were believed to improve mental clarity, others to enhance physical energy, and still others to provide protection against illness. This medicinal approach to fragrance gave aromatic choices additional meaning beyond simple aesthetic preference. Regional fragrance traditions reflected local resources, climate conditions, and cultural preferences. Southern China, with its warm climates and abundant flowers, developed different aromatic traditions than northern China. Mountain regions used different aromatic plants than coastal areas, and urban centres had access to imported fragrances that weren't available in rural areas. These regional differences created a rich diversity of aromatic cultures across the Chinese Empire. Women's hygiene practices in ancient China were complex systems that balanced health needs with aesthetic goals, social expectations with personal comfort, and traditional wisdom with practical limitations. The female experience of cleanliness and personal care was shaped by gender roles, social status, family expectations, and cultural ideals that defined what it meant to be a proper woman in Chinese society. The foundation of women's hygiene in ancient China was the concept that female health and beauty were interconnected with moral character and social propriety. A woman who maintained proper hygiene wasn't just clean. She was demonstrating virtue, self-discipline, and respect for social norms. This connection between cleanliness and character meant that women's hygiene practices carried moral weight beyond their practical benefits. Female bathing practices were more elaborate and frequent than those of men, reflecting both cultural expectations about feminine cleanliness and the belief that women's bodies required more careful maintenance. Women of higher social status often bathed daily or every other day, using carefully prepared herbal waters and aromatic preparations. The bathing process itself was often a social activity, with female relatives or servants assisting with washing, massage, and hair care. Women's bathing preparations were typically more complex than men's, involving multiple steps and specialized products. Herbal baths designed to enhance skin softness, improve complexion, or address specific health concerns were common. Popular ingredients included milk, honey, rice water, various flowers, and medicinal herbs chosen for their specific beneficial properties. Some wealthy women used baths containing ground pearls, precious stones, or exotic ingredients imported from distant regions. Menstrual hygiene presented unique challenges in ancient China that required creative solutions and careful management. Women used various absorbent materials including soft cloths, cotton, and specially prepared plant fibers. These materials were often reusable and required careful washing and maintenance. The social stigma around menstruation meant that managing menstrual hygiene had to be done discreetly, requiring women to develop sophisticated systems for handling their needs without attracting attention. Feminine grooming practices extended far beyond basic cleanliness to include elaborate beauty routines that were considered essential for proper womanhood. Hair care was particularly important, with women spending considerable time daily brushing, styling, and ornament their hair. The maintenance of long, lustrous hair was seen as both a health indicator and a beauty requirement, leading to complex hair care routines involving multiple treatments and styling techniques. Women's clothing and undergarments played crucial roles in hygiene management, particularly in absorbing sweat and protecting outer garments from body oils and odours. The layering system common in Chinese women's dress created multiple barriers between the body and outer garments, with inner layers being changed and washed more frequently than outer layers. The proper management of these clothing layers was a sophisticated skill that required planning, resources, and considerable labour. Skincare for women in ancient China was an elaborate art that combined cosmetic enhancement with health maintenance. Women used various natural preparations to cleanse, moisturize, and protect their skin. Rice powder was a popular base for facial treatments, often mixed with herbs, flowers, or other beneficial ingredients. Some women used preparations containing ground pearls, jade powder, or other precious materials believed to enhance skin beauty and health. The social expectations for women's appearance meant that maintaining proper hygiene and grooming was not optional, but essential for social acceptance and marriage prospects. A woman's reputation could be significantly affected by her appearance and cleanliness, making hygiene practices a form of social insurance. This pressure led to the development of increasingly sophisticated beauty and hygiene routines, particularly among women of higher social status. Women's hygiene education was typically passed down through female family lines, with mothers, grandmothers, and other female relatives teaching young women the complex skills needed for proper self-maintenance. This education included not just practical techniques, but also the cultural knowledge needed to navigate the social aspects of feminine hygiene. Young women learned which practices were appropriate for their social status, how to manage hygiene discreetly, and how to use hygiene and grooming to enhance their social position. Pregnancy and childbirth created special hygiene needs that were addressed through traditional practices and cultural rituals. Pregnant women followed specific hygiene routines believed to benefit both mother and child, including special baths, dietary modifications, and clothing choices. Postpartum hygiene practices were elaborate affairs that combined practical health needs with cultural beliefs about recovery and purification after childbirth. The economic aspects of women's hygiene were significant, particularly for families of modest means. The materials and time required for proper feminine hygiene represented a considerable investment, leading to the development of economical alternatives and community sharing systems. Women often shared expensive ingredients, pooled resources for major hygiene needs, and developed reciprocal arrangements for assistance with labour-intensive hygiene practices. Women's hygiene practices also served as important social bonding activities that strengthened female relationships and community ties. Group bathing, shared grooming sessions, and collective preparation of hygiene materials created opportunities for social interaction, information sharing, and mutual support. These activities helped maintain cultural traditions while providing practical assistance with the demanding requirements of feminine hygiene. Ancient Chinese hygiene practices were deeply attuned to seasonal changes, reflecting a sophisticated understanding of how environmental conditions affected human health, comfort, and cleanliness needs. This seasonal approach to personal care was based on traditional Chinese medicine principles about adapting human behavior to natural cycles, creating yearly rhythms of hygiene practice that maximized health benefits, while working with rather than against natural forces. Spring hygiene practices focused on renewal, cleansing, and preparation for the more active months ahead. After winter's period of reduced bathing and limited outdoor activity, spring was seen as a time for thorough cleaning and revitalization. People engaged in more frequent bathing, deep cleaning of clothing and bedding, and dietary changes designed to support the body's natural detoxification processes. Spring cleaning wasn't just for houses, it was for humans too. The Chinese believed that winter's accumulation of internal dampness and stagnation needed to be cleared from the body during spring months. This led to specific hygiene practices designed to promote circulation, eliminate toxins, and prepare the body for summer's heat. Steam baths, herbal scrubs, and increased physical activity were all part of spring's hygiene regimen. Even the types of soap and cleansing agents used were adjusted to support the body's spring renewal process. Summer hygiene practices were dominated by the need to manage increased sweating, heat, and the higher risk of skin problems and infections. Bathing became more frequent, often daily for those who could afford it, and cooling elements were added to baths and cleansing preparations. Herbal ingredients with cooling properties like chrysanthemum, mint, and cucumber were popular summer additions to hygiene routines. The management of summer body odor required special strategies that went beyond simple cleansing. Clothing choices became crucial, with lighter fabrics, more frequent changes, and strategic layering to manage sweat and odor. Dietary modifications were also important, with certain foods avoided because they were believed to increase unpleasant body odors during hot weather. The wealthy could afford more frequent complete bathing, while common people developed efficient partial washing techniques that conserved water while maintaining cleanliness. Summer skincare focused on protection from heat and sun damage, as well as prevention of heat rashes and other warm weather skin problems. Cooling lotions made from cucumber, aloe-like plants, and other soothing ingredients were applied to prevent and treat heat-related skin issues. Protective clothing and accessories like wide-brimmed hats and parasols were essential parts of summer hygiene routines, particularly for women of higher social status. Autumn hygiene practices were designed to prepare the body for winter's challenges while taking advantage of the season's moderate temperatures for thorough cleaning and maintenance. This was often considered the best time for deep cleaning activities that were too difficult in winter's cold or summer's heat. Clothing was thoroughly cleaned and prepared for winter storage, and people often engaged in more intensive personal grooming to prepare for the social activities of the harvest season. The Chinese viewed autumn as a time for strengthening and preparation, leading to hygiene practices that emphasized building resilience and preparing for winter's limitations. Moisturizing treatments became more important as air became drier, and dietary changes supported the body's preparation for cold weather. Hair care routines were adjusted to prevent winter dryness and brittleness, often involving deep conditioning treatments with oils and herbal preparations. Winter hygiene practices had to balance cleanliness needs with the practical limitations of cold weather and limited resources. Bathing became less frequent but more strategic, with people learning to maintain essential cleanliness while conserving fuel and avoiding the health risks associated with being wet and cold. Partial washing techniques were refined to maintain hygiene with minimal water and heat usage. The Chinese developed sophisticated systems for maintaining hygiene during winter's cold months that required minimal heating and water use. Dry cleaning techniques using powders and absorbent materials became more important. Clothing management was crucial, with frequent changing of undergarments compensating for less frequent full bathing. Indoor air quality became a major concern, leading to the use of incense, aromatic herbs, and ventilation strategies to maintain pleasant living conditions. Winter skincare focused on protection from cold and dry air, with heavier oils and protective preparations used to prevent chapping and dryness. The types of cleansing agents used were adjusted to be gentler and more moisturizing, avoiding harsh preparations that could damage skin already stressed by cold weather. Hair care routines emphasized protection and moisture retention, often involving protective styling and overnight oil treatments. Seasonal transitions required special hygiene attention as bodies adjusted to changing environmental conditions. The shift from winter to spring was particularly important, requiring gradual increases in bathing frequency and changes in cleansing preparations. Similarly, the transition from summer to autumn required adjustments in hygiene routines to prepare for cooler, drier conditions. These transitional periods were seen as times when the body was more vulnerable to illness, requiring careful attention to hygiene practices that supported adaptation to changing conditions. The vast expanse of the Chinese Empire, stretching from tropical southern regions to cold northern frontiers, from humid coastal areas to arid western deserts, created dramatically different conditions for maintaining personal hygiene. These geographic and climatic variations led to the development of distinct regional hygiene traditions that reflected local resources, environmental challenges, and cultural adaptations to specific conditions. Northern Chinese hygiene practices were shaped by cold winters, limited water sources during freezing months, and a cultural emphasis on efficiency and conservation. The harsh climate necessitated hygiene routines that could be maintained with minimal heating and water use during winter months. People developed sophisticated techniques for staying clean while conserving resources, including dry cleaning methods, strategic partial washing, and clothing management systems that maximize cleanliness with minimal effort. The northern regions developed particularly creative solutions for winter bathing that balanced hygiene needs with fuel conservation. Public bathhouses were more common and more essential in northern cities, providing communal heating that was more efficient than individual household bathing. These facilities became important social centres during winter months, providing not just cleaning opportunities, but also social interaction and community warmth. Northern Chinese soap making reflected the region's agricultural base and available materials. Animal fats from sheep and cattle were more readily available than in southern regions, leading to different soap formulations. The colder climate also meant that soaps needed to work effectively in cooler water, leading to formulations that produced adequate lather even when water couldn't be heated to optimal temperatures. Southern Chinese hygiene practices were influenced by warm, humid climates that promoted frequent bathing, but also created challenges with mold, fungal infections, and rapid bacterial growth. The abundant water sources and warmer temperatures allowed for more frequent bathing year-round, but the high humidity required special attention to drying and preventing moisture-related problems. The southern regions developed hygiene practices that took advantage of the warm climate while addressing its challenges. Daily bathing was more common and practical in southern China, leading to different cultural expectations about cleanliness frequency. However, the constant humidity meant that clothing and personal items required special care to prevent mold and mildew, leading to sophisticated systems for drying and preserving textiles. Southern Chinese cleansing preparations often incorporated tropical plants and materials that weren't available in northern regions. Coconut oil, tropical fruits, and various warm climate herbs provided ingredients for soaps, skin treatments, and hair care products that were specifically adapted to humid conditions. These regional specialties became trade items that were exported to other parts of the empire. Coastal regions developed hygiene practices that incorporated marine resources while addressing the challenges of salt air and high humidity. Seaweed, salt, and various marine-derived materials were used in cleansing preparations. The salt air created specific skin and hair care needs that required protective treatments and special washing techniques to remove salt residue while maintaining moisture balance. Coastal Chinese communities often had different bathing cultures than inland areas, with ocean and river bathing being more common and acceptable. The availability of flowing water for bathing created different hygiene expectations and practices. However, the saltwater also required freshwater rinsing, leading to two-stage bathing systems that combined saltwater cleansing with freshwater finishing. Mountain regions faced unique hygiene challenges related to altitude, weather extremes, and limited resources. The thin air and intense sun at high altitudes created specific skin care needs, while the limited growing season and harsh conditions meant that hygiene materials had to be carefully preserved and efficiently used. Mountain communities developed particularly hardy hygiene practices that could withstand extreme conditions. The mountain regions often had access to unique plant materials for hygiene use, including high-altitude herbs and minerals that weren't available in lowland areas. These special ingredients became valuable trade items and were incorporated into luxury hygiene preparations for wealthy lowland dwellers. The knowledge of these mountain resources was carefully guarded and passed down through generations of mountain-dwelling families. Desert and arid regions developed hygiene practices that emphasized water conservation while maintaining essential cleanliness. Dry cleaning techniques using sand, clay, and absorbent powders were highly developed in these areas. The scarcity of water meant that every drop had to be used efficiently, leading to multi-stage cleaning systems that maximized the cleaning value of limited water supplies. The arid regions also developed unique approaches to managing body temperature and comfort that were integrated with hygiene practices. Cooling techniques, protective clothing, and strategic timing of cleaning activities all became part of desert hygiene culture. The extreme conditions also led to the development of particularly effective preservation techniques for hygiene materials and protective treatments for exposed skin. Urban versus rural hygiene practices showed significant variations regardless of geographic region. Cities had access to specialized hygiene services, imported materials, and more sophisticated facilities, but also faced challenges with air quality, water pollution, and overcrowding. Rural areas often had cleaner air and water, but limited access to specialized hygiene materials and services. The trade networks that connected different regions of China created exchanges of hygiene knowledge and materials that enriched local practices while maintaining regional distinctiveness. Northern cities might import southern aromatic plants, while southern areas acquired northern techniques for cold weather hygiene management. These exchanges helped spread innovations while preserving the regional adaptations that made each area's hygiene practices uniquely suited to local conditions. In ancient China, the boundary between hygiene and medicine was virtually non-existent. Personal cleanliness wasn't just about social acceptability or aesthetic appeal. It was considered fundamental preventive medicine that could ward off illness, promote longevity, and maintain the delicate balance of energies that traditional Chinese medicine saw as essential to health. This medical approach to hygiene created sophisticated practices that combined practical cleansing with therapeutic treatments. Traditional Chinese medicine viewed the skin as one of the body's primary defensive barriers against illness and environmental threats. Proper skincare wasn't vanity, it was medical necessity. The skin was believed to be directly connected to the lung system in Chinese medical theory, meaning that skin health affected respiratory function and overall vitality. This connection led to hygiene practices that were designed to support not just skin health, but overall physical well-being. The Chinese medical approach to bathing emphasized the therapeutic properties of water temperature, mineral content, and herbal additives. Different water temperatures were believed to have different effects on the body's energy systems. Warm water opened the pores and promoted circulation, while cool water was thought to strengthen the skin and close the pores. The timing of baths was also considered medically significant, with certain times of day and seasons being more beneficial for bathing than others. Herbal baths were a cornerstone of Chinese medical hygiene, with specific herbal combinations prescribed for different health conditions and constitutional types. A person with too much internal heat might be prescribed cooling baths with chrysanthemum and mint, while someone with deficient energy might use warming herbs like ginger and cinnamon. These weren't just pleasant additions to bath water, they were precisely formulated medical treatments that happened to involve getting clean. The Chinese developed diagnostic techniques that used hygiene-related observations to assess health status. The condition of a person's skin, hair, nails, and general cleanliness were all considered important diagnostic indicators. A skilled Chinese physician could supposedly determine a person's health status and constitutional type just by observing their hygiene-related characteristics. This made personal cleanliness both a health practice and a diagnostic tool. Seasonal hygiene in the medical context was tied to the Chinese understanding of how human energy systems needed to adapt to environmental changes throughout the year. Spring hygiene practices were designed to support the liver and promote the body's natural detoxification processes. Summer hygiene focused on supporting the heart and managing heat-related stress. Autumn practices prepared the body for winter by strengthening the lung system, while winter hygiene conserved energy and supported kidney function. The Chinese medical approach to dental hygiene went far beyond tooth cleaning to encompass the belief that oral health reflected and affected overall systemic health. Different areas of the mouth were believed to be connected to different organ systems, making dental care a form of systemic health maintenance. Gum massage tongue cleaning, and specific herbal mouth treatments were all considered important medical practices that supported overall health. Chinese physicians prescribed specific hygiene routines for different health conditions, constitutional types, and life stages. Pregnant women had specialized hygiene requirements designed to support both maternal and fetal health. Elderly people had different hygiene needs that reflected their changing energy patterns and reduced ability to regulate body temperature. Children's hygiene practices were designed to support their rapid growth and development while building strong constitutional foundations. The integration of nutrition with hygiene practices reflected the Chinese understanding that external cleanliness and internal purity were interconnected. Dietary recommendations were often combined with specific hygiene practices to address health issues comprehensively. For example, someone with skin problems might be prescribed both internal herbal treatments and external cleansing routines that work together to address the underlying imbalance. Chinese medical hygiene included sophisticated understanding of how emotional and mental states affected cleanliness, needs, and practices. Stress, anxiety, and emotional imbalance were believed to affect body odor, skin condition, and overall hygiene needs. This led to hygiene practices that were designed to promote emotional balance while addressing physical cleanliness, essentially turning daily hygiene routines into mindfulness practices that supported mental health. The Chinese developed preventive hygiene practices that were specifically designed to ward off illness during epidemic periods. These practices combined increased cleanliness with specific herbal preparations and protective measures that were believed to strengthen the body's resistance to disease. During plague outbreaks, hygiene routines became medical interventions that could mean the difference between health and illness. Chinese medical texts included detailed instructions for hygiene practices that were considered essential for maintaining health and preventing disease. These weren't general recommendations, but specific, detailed protocols that took into account individual constitution, seasonal variations, and health status. The precision of these medical hygiene recommendations reflected the sophisticated understanding that Chinese physicians had developed about the relationship between cleanliness and health. The training of Chinese physicians included education about hygiene assessment and prescription, recognizing that the ability to evaluate and recommend appropriate hygiene practices was an essential medical skill. Physicians learned to observe patients' hygiene-related characteristics as diagnostic indicators and to prescribe specific cleansing and care routines as medical treatments. This made hygiene assessment and prescription a standard part of Chinese medical practice. Maintaining personal hygiene in ancient China wasn't just a matter of personal preference or social expectation. It was an economic decision that could significantly impact a family's budget and resource allocation. The cost of staying clean varied dramatically based on social status, geographic location, and individual standards, creating complex economic calculations that balanced hygiene needs against other essential expenses. For wealthy families, hygiene represented a significant but manageable expense that served multiple functions beyond basic cleanliness. The elaborate bathing preparations, exotic soaps, and luxury aromatic materials used by the wealthy were as much about displaying social status as they were about personal care. A single bath for a wealthy woman might cost more than a poor family's monthly food budget, but it served important social and political functions that justified the expense. The wealthy invested in permanent infrastructure for hygiene that provided long-term economic benefits despite high initial costs. Private bathing facilities, water heating systems, and sophisticated drainage required substantial capital investment but provided ongoing convenience and status benefits. Wealthy households also employed specialized servants whose sole responsibility was hygiene-related tasks, creating employment while ensuring consistently high standards of personal care. Middle-class families faced more complex economic decisions about hygiene spending, needing to balance social expectations with budget constraints. They often invested in hygiene materials and practices that provided maximum social benefit for the cost, choosing items that were visible to others over private luxury. A middle-class family might spend considerable money on quality soap and grooming tools while economizing on private bathing frequency or water heating. The middle class often participated in group purchasing arrangements and shared hygiene resources to reduce individual costs while maintaining acceptable standards. Families might pool resources to purchase expensive ingredients for soap making or share the costs of heating large quantities of bath water. These cooperative arrangements allowed middle-class families to access higher quality hygiene materials than they could afford individually. For poor families, hygiene represented a constant economic challenge that required creative solutions and careful resource management. Basic cleanliness had to be maintained with minimal cash expenditure, leading to the development of ingenious alternatives and substitutes for commercial hygiene products. Poor families became experts at finding free or low-cost materials that could serve hygiene functions: plant materials for cleaning, ash for soap making, and natural water sources for bathing. The poor often relied on seasonal abundance to stock up on hygiene materials when they were readily available and cheap. During harvest seasons, families might gather and process large quantities of soap-making materials, herbs for cleansing preparations, and other hygiene-related supplies that could be stored and used throughout the year. This seasonal approach required planning and storage capabilities, but allowed families to maintain hygiene standards despite limited cash income. Urban areas typically had higher hygiene costs than rural areas due to the need to purchase materials that rural families could gather themselves, as well as the higher costs of water and fuel in cities. However, urban areas also provided more opportunities for earning money to pay for hygiene needs, as well as access to specialized services and commercial hygiene products that weren't available in rural areas. Rural families often had lower cash costs for hygiene, but higher labor investments in gathering, processing, and preparing hygiene materials. Rural hygiene was more integrated with agricultural activities, with families using agricultural byproducts and seasonal materials for hygiene purposes. The economic calculation was different: time and labor versus cash expenditure, but the total resource investment could be equally significant. The hygiene economy created numerous specialized occupations and business opportunities that served different economic segments of society. Soap makers, perfumers, bathhouse operators, and hygiene-related servants all earned their living from the demand for cleanliness. These businesses ranged from luxury operations serving the wealthy to basic services providing essential hygiene support for common people. Seasonal variations in hygiene costs created economic pressures that families had to plan for throughout the year. Winter hygiene was typically more expensive due to fuel costs for heating water and the higher prices of stored materials. Summer might bring increased bathing frequency, but also the availability of fresh materials for hygiene use. Families learned to budget for these seasonal variations in hygiene expenses. The social costs of inadequate hygiene could be economically significant, affecting marriage prospects, business relationships, and social standing in ways that had real economic consequences. Families often prioritized hygiene spending for family members whose social and economic success was most important to the family's overall welfare. This created internal family hierarchies in hygiene spending that reflected broader social and economic strategies. Trade in hygiene-related materials created economic opportunities and challenges across different regions and social levels. Luxury hygiene materials were important trade goods that connected different parts of the empire and provided income for producers and merchants. However, this trade also created dependencies and vulnerabilities when trade routes were disrupted or when political changes affected access to traditional hygiene materials. The development of hygiene-related technologies and innovations was often driven by economic considerations, finding ways to provide adequate cleanliness at lower cost or to create products that could command premium prices. Successful innovations in hygiene materials or techniques could create significant economic opportunities for their developers while improving hygiene standards for broader populations. Personal hygiene in ancient China existed within a complex web of cultural taboos, social expectations, and behavioral rules that could turn the simple act of washing oneself into a minefield of potential social violations. These rules weren't arbitrary. They reflected deep cultural values about propriety, social hierarchy, gender roles, and spiritual purity that shaped every aspect of how people approached personal cleanliness. The most fundamental taboo surrounding hygiene was the prohibition against public nudity during bathing or personal care activities. This wasn't just about modesty, it reflected beliefs about spiritual vulnerability and social propriety that made exposure of the unclothed body a serious transgression. Even in private family contexts, there were specific rules about who could see whom in various states of undress, creating complex protocols for family bathing and personal care activities. Gender segregation in hygiene activities was strictly enforced across all social levels, with separate facilities, different bathing schedules, and distinct protocols for men and women. Mixed gender bathing was not only socially unacceptable, but could result in serious legal and social consequences for all involved. Even married couples often followed protocols that maintained some level of privacy and separation during personal hygiene activities. The social hierarchy was rigorously maintained in all hygiene-related activities, with specific rules about who could bathe when, where, and with what materials. Servants and lower-status family members couldn't use the same bathing facilities or hygiene materials as their superiors without permission. The order of bathing, the quality of materials used, and even the temperature of bath water were all subject to social ranking considerations. Age-based taboos created additional complexity in hygiene practices, with different rules for children, adults, and elderly people. Young children might be exempted from certain hygiene requirements, but faced restrictions on when and how they could participate in adult hygiene activities. Elderly people had special considerations that both honoured their status and acknowledged their physical limitations, creating modified hygiene protocols that balanced respect with practicality. Religious and spiritual taboos affected hygiene practices in ways that sometimes conflicted with practical cleanliness needs. Certain days were considered inauspicious for bathing, while others were required for purification activities. Some religious observances required specific types of cleansing, while others prohibited certain hygiene activities altogether. Navigating these religious requirements while maintaining social and practical hygiene standards required considerable cultural knowledge. Menstrual taboos created particularly complex challenges for women's hygiene practices, with cultural beliefs about spiritual contamination and physical impurity affecting everything from bathing schedules to clothing choices. Women during menstruation faced restrictions on their hygiene activities that could conflict with their cleanliness needs, requiring careful navigation of cultural expectations while maintaining personal health and comfort. Pregnancy and childbirth created their own sets of hygiene-related taboos and requirements that reflected beliefs about maternal and infant health, spiritual purity, and social protection. Pregnant women had specific hygiene requirements that were believed to affect the health and fortune of their unborn children, while new mothers faced elaborate purification rituals that combined hygiene with spiritual cleansing. Death-related taboos affected hygiene practices in profound ways, with specific requirements for cleansing after exposure to death or illness. These taboos could require elaborate purification rituals that went far beyond normal hygiene practices, involving specific materials, procedures, and timing that were believed to remove spiritual contamination and protect against illness. Social interactions around hygiene were governed by complex rules about when and how hygiene activities could be discussed, observed, or assisted. Offering hygiene assistance could be interpreted as either helpful or insulting, depending on the social relationship and context. Commenting on someone's hygiene status was a delicate social skill that required careful consideration of relationships, timing, and cultural appropriateness. The intersection of hygiene with courtship and marriage created particularly complex social rules that affected everything from personal grooming standards to bathing schedules. Unmarried men and women faced different hygiene expectations than married people, while widows and widowers had their own specific requirements. The use of cosmetics, perfumes, and other hygiene-related enhancements was subject to rules about appropriateness for different marital statuses and social contexts. Professional and occupational hygiene rules reflected the belief that different types of work created different hygiene requirements and social expectations. Scholars, merchants, farmers, and artisans all had distinct hygiene standards that reflected their social roles and practical needs. Violating these occupational hygiene expectations could affect professional relationships and career prospects. Regional variations in hygiene taboos meant that travelling between different areas required cultural adaptation and awareness of local customs. What was acceptable hygiene behaviour in one region might be offensive or inappropriate in another, making cultural competence in hygiene practices an important skill for merchants, officials, and other travellers. The consequences of violating hygiene-related social rules could range from mild social embarrassment to serious legal and social sanctions. Understanding and following these complex rules was essential for maintaining social standing and avoiding conflict. This made hygiene literacy, understanding the cultural codes surrounding cleanliness, as important as actual cleanliness itself. As we reach the end of our journey through the surprisingly complex world of ancient Chinese hygiene, it's worth reflecting on how many of these time-tested practices continue to influence modern approaches to personal care, health, and wellness. The ancient Chinese understanding of hygiene as an integrated system connecting physical health, mental well-being, and social harmony offers perspectives that remain relevant in our contemporary world. The holistic approach to hygiene that characterized ancient Chinese practice, viewing personal cleanliness as inseparable from overall health and well-being, has found new appreciation in modern wellness movements. The idea that external cleanliness reflects and affects internal health is now supported by scientific understanding of the skin microbiome, the gut-skin connection, and the psychological benefits of self-care routines. Ancient Chinese practitioners intuitively understood connections that modern science has taken centuries to rediscover. Many traditional Chinese hygiene ingredients have found their way into modern commercial products, often marketed as natural or organic alternatives to synthetic ingredients. Rice water for hair care, green tea extracts for skin treatment, and various herbal preparations for cleansing and conditioning all trace their origins to ancient Chinese hygiene practices. The global popularity of these ingredients reflects both their practical effectiveness and the modern desire for natural, traditional wellness solutions. The Chinese approach to seasonal hygiene adaptation has influenced modern understanding of how environmental changes affect skin and hair care needs. The concept of adjusting hygiene routines based on climate, humidity, and temperature has become standard advice in dermatology and cosmetic science. Modern skincare routines that emphasize different products for different seasons echo the ancient Chinese practice of harmonizing personal care with natural cycles. Traditional Chinese medicine's emphasis on individual constitution and personalized hygiene recommendations has parallels in modern personalized skincare and wellness approaches. The idea that different people need different hygiene routines based on their individual characteristics, health status, and life circumstances is now supported by scientific understanding of genetic variations in skin type, microbiome diversity, and individual health needs. The ancient Chinese integration of nutrition with hygiene practices has found renewed relevance in modern understanding of how diet affects skin health, body odor, and overall well-being. The traditional Chinese belief that what you eat affects how you smell and how your skin looks is now supported by research on how nutrition influences skin condition, wound healing, and even social attractiveness through chemical signals. The mindfulness aspects of traditional Chinese hygiene practices, treating daily cleansing as opportunities for meditation, self-care, and mental health maintenance, have become important elements of modern wellness philosophy. The ancient practice of turning routine hygiene activities into mindful, intentional practices has been embraced by modern stress reduction and mental health approaches. The Chinese understanding of hygiene as social communication, using cleanliness, grooming, and appearance to signal social status, cultural identity, and personal values, remains relevant in modern contexts where personal presentation continues to carry significant social meaning. The ancient Chinese sophistication in using hygiene practices for social positioning offers insights into contemporary discussions about appearance, identity, and social dynamics. The economic approaches to hygiene that ancient Chinese families developed, balancing cost with effectiveness, sharing resources, and adapting practices to available materials, provide relevant models for modern, sustainable living and budget-conscious personal care. The ancient Chinese creativity in developing effective hygiene solutions with limited resources offers inspiration for reducing consumption while maintaining health and social standards. The traditional Chinese emphasis on preventive hygiene, using cleanliness practices to maintain health rather than just treat problems, aligns with modern public health approaches that prioritize prevention over treatment. Ancient Chinese hygiene practices that were designed to prevent illness, maintain energy, and promote longevity reflect an understanding of preventive healthcare that modern medicine continues to develop. The regional adaptations that characterized ancient Chinese hygiene practices offer models for contemporary efforts to develop culturally appropriate and environmentally sustainable hygiene solutions for different global contexts. The ancient Chinese success in creating effective hygiene systems adapted to diverse climates, resources, and cultural contexts provides insights for modern global health and sustainability challenges. Perhaps most importantly, the ancient Chinese understanding that hygiene is about more than just being clean, that it encompasses health, social relationships, self-respect, and harmony with natural and social environments, offers a more comprehensive and meaningful approach to personal care than purely functional or aesthetic perspectives. In our modern world, where personal care has often become either purely utilitarian or excessively commercialized, the ancient Chinese integration of practical, health, social, and spiritual aspects of hygiene provides a more balanced and fulfilling approach to this essential human activity. As we've seen throughout this exploration, ancient Chinese hygiene practices were sophisticated, adaptive, and surprisingly modern in their understanding of the connections between cleanliness, health, and well-being. While we may not want to return to heated bath water or rely entirely on plant-based cleansers, there's much we can learn from the wisdom, creativity, and holistic thinking that characterized ancient Chinese approaches to staying clean, healthy, and socially connected. The next time you step into your modern shower with its precisely controlled temperature, antibacterial soap, and array of specialized products, you might spare a thought for those ancient Chinese who managed to maintain cleanliness, health, and dignity with rice water, plant ash, and an impressive understanding of how personal care connects to everything else in human life. They may not have had our conveniences, but they had wisdom about hygiene that we're still rediscovering today. And with that thought, perhaps it's time to let these ancient voices fade into the comfortable darkness of sleep, where dreams of imperial bathhouses and herbal hair rinses can carry you gently into the night. After all, getting good rest was probably part of their hygiene routine too. And that's one ancient practice we can all embrace without any special equipment required. Sweet dreams, and may your pillows be as comfortable as imperial silk, and your sleep as peaceful as a perfectly balanced ancient Chinese hygiene routine.